if you argue for yourself and you tell yourself that you aren't good enough, if you tell yourself that you can't do it, and if you tell yourself that it's too hard for you, guess what? You're going to win. You're going to win that damn argument. You're for sure going to win that argument. If you tell yourself you can't do it, if you tell yourself that you're not good enough, you tell yourself it's too cold, you tell yourself it hurts too much, guess what? You're going to win. But if you argue the other side, if you argue for yourself to be better, to be stronger, if you argue for it, you're for sure going to win that argument too. So be careful what you argue with, because it should be something that's in line with what you actually want, right? And you have to sometimes be less emotional to realize what you want. You have to be emotional to fuel the choices that you make, for sure. But if you're emotional in looking at the end, the North Star, if you're emotional looking at the North Star, you might not see the North Star, right? And so it's really important to piece those two things together, where I am today and where I'm supposed to be, and just understand what could be destructive or what could be helpful.
All right, Tim, my dude, how's it going, man?
What's up, Josh? It's actually the new year. Happy New Year, man.
Yeah. Happy New Year, dude. I'm grinning. I'm happy to be here, and I thought I should tell you that that last episode that we dropped of you and me on New Year's Day did really well, man. People were psyched. I think it just resonated, on that day during that reflection period. And dude, you just had some straight bangers in there, and I know Brendan told me that too. He was like, dude, Tim just bangers on this pod. So good job, man. But Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I feel I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I was reflecting on that podcast a lot, and I've been reflecting about life a lot. I think it just happens during the new year, but also with injuries, that also puts you in this spiral of self-reflection. And then I don't know, like the life and the age that I think I am, having my quarter life crisis type stuff. It's like goes into deep reflection. And then I have a podcast where it's kind of about sharing the utmost honest opinions about what you think, and we have a podcast that's catered towards greatness. And so when it comes to reflection, honesty, and then the path towards greatness, things are going to come out. And I think that's kind of where that podcast came from. But that's not too different from our podcast today, honestly. So I'm pretty excited.
Dude, the quarter life crisis. Are you 25? You're only 24.
I'm
You haven't
turning
even
25. Yeah, in
Oh
like
God, you're
2
turning
months.
20. So it's a real thing. It sounds like a joke because you always hear the midlife crisis, but I definitely had a quarter life crisis. But instead of climbing tall blocks like you, I was sitting behind a small desk, being unhappy. But it's a real thing. So I want to make fun of you and be like, dude, I'm old. Like, oh, it's so rough having a quarter life crisis. But it's a real thing, and uh, yeah, a lot of stuff happens when you're in your mid 20s. It's a big shift, and you will be a very different person 5 years from now. You will be even that much further along in mastery, Tim. You will be better. I promise.
Hell yeah.
Okay, well, you kind of hinted that our topic today had a little something to do with that last topic, and I just want to tease it at the beginning because it does connect. And I wanted to I wanted to use the words you used when we first talked on the phone, where you were like vomit mouth. I was like vomit mouth, but let's say it a little more nicely about this topic today. I think when I sat down and kind of was writing my notes, it was just this idea of who are you when things don't go as planned, and it comes out often. I just said vomit mouth, and it's just this idea of like sometimes when things aren't going so well, yeah, people start complaining. When I say people, I mean me or you, and it's about tackling that and what the ramifications are of that. And so I don't know. Do you want to tease it any further? This is going to happen, later on the second half of the show, but this is just our little teaser
Yeah.
for it.
No, I love this. I think, the context for this discussion and the context for all of our discussions is basically like, what have we been seeing? Like what have you been going through? What have you been doing? And I just had three young, bright, very talented individuals stay at my place for the first week of January, and I got to show them around Red Rocks, which is,
And they
this
crushed.
awesome.
They
Yeah,
crushed.
they crushed.
They
Yeah,
really
they
crushed. They
they
really
for
did.
sure crushed. It's funny because personally, I don't have an emphasis on these things. I don't care about things getting to people's heads or anything. I think that may be real, but honestly, for me, the focus is what could you have done better, right? And unfortunately, it comes off in this way. I had to text them this morning, and I texted their parents, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you guys as kids. You know, you guys have raised them well." And then I texted them, and I was like, "Hey guys, like, I wanted to highlight that me being strict and me expecting a lot isn't me not being proud, and I'm proud of a lot of these things as well. But when you hang out, if you hung out with me during these trips, it would just be like relentless. I'm brutal. A lot of my brutality comes from what I think you could have done better. And for kids, obviously, that's a lot of stuff when it comes to rock climbing, and especially when you like haven't rock climbed much around people. If you haven't rock climbed much on things that are really really hard, if you haven't climbed in red rocks too, like it's a pretty tough area sometimes in specific places. It might give you a lot of success, and then it might give you a lot of like hard failure in the same grade range, or even a grade range that you should be doing better on, or whatever. There's a whole, and climbing itself is really complex and difficult. So you know that context being said, Josh and I had a conversation about what have I been talking to these kids about lately, or what's been going through my mind and like what's been happening. And I kind of just like that's what I said. Oh, vomit mouth. It's I think the actual concept there, because this came from a conversation with Joe Kinder. He named a route called diarrhea mouth, I think, in
Oh, that's
rifle.
right. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's supposed to be called diarrhea mouth, but vomit mouth was like more the concept that came to mind because it came from Vale. So Vale is like kind of the star child individual that I work with. He's definitely has maybe the greatest resume, but he the most had this thing that I kept thinking about as a vomit mouth, because things would be said, but they would come out before he would think about them. And usually the things that he would say were representations of his feelings and his reactions. And we would argue a lot of us, a lot of the time, Vale and I would argue because I would give him an kind of an objective standpoint of like what I see, and he would give me his feelings. And I really try because I understand it well. I try not to argue with him and make him feel like he was wrong, but instead try to point out that like, hey, is this helpful? Like at the end of it, I always kind of say, hey, is this helpful? Um, and then I kind of go into this thought of like vomit thoughts, where Abram is this other individual who's pretty much just as talented as Vale, I would say, but maybe a little bit more hidden. He doesn't speak much, and kind of the internal process was a little bit more, I think, negative sometimes, and maybe it was negative then positive, but then it would not come out. So this kind of brought up a really nice conversation. And when I was going through my notes, it actually it's interesting the way that you said that this concept kind of came to you. The concept that came to me with this topic was that perspective is everything, and perspective might be the thing giving you a lot, and it might be the thing holding you back. The thing that I was thinking about was 100 people could have the exact same experience, but they could all walk away feeling like they had a different one. And that just shows you how important and how significant and how powerful perspective could be, right? If 100 people go through the exact same thing, they can all walk away feeling differently about the impact of that experience, right? They could all get this different value. Well, some of them could get no value. Some of them can have a worse time after the same experience, right? As long as the experience is powerful enough, I think people can walk away with a different experience. And rock climbing is a pretty powerful experience. So
Well, first of all, I can't believe you named names. I don't know if we're gonna have to bleep that out, but
I asked them. I
yeah,
asked them.
okay, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I think it's interesting to hear that climbing with you is just nonstop brutal. That you're just gonna be, attention to detail, and I like that you're proud that you're how'd you put it? That you're consistent take on pointing out issues and trying to get them to be better isn't does not replace you being proud. And it makes me think of this one time where I was climbing with a girl, or I was on a climbing trip with this girl, and she had her sight set on Better Eat Your Wheaties, which is a kind of classic V8, a test piece V8
Dude, hard one.
in Waco. And it's hard, right? And she had never climbed V8 before.
Hmm.
And we go out there and she just smashes it. I mean, she just
Oh, really?
totally smashes it. Yeah. And she was just a crimping machine. And she was like really proud of herself. And she, looked at me and she was like, "Oh, what do you think?" I was like, "Good job, but like I'm not really impressed. Like that was clearly super easy for you. Like maybe your goal was a mistake. V10 seems more
God, I
like
love that.
something you should be looking at." And it kind of like upset her a little bit, and I understand why. Perhaps my tact wasn't quite the right tact, but the point was is that what I'm impressed by or proud of is that pushing of one's limits, not of ticking a grade or a climb, because honestly, like that V8 was probably easier for her than the V7 that she did last year. That was hard for her. Like it just wasn't,
Yeah.
it didn't draw anything special out of her. And so I think
Oh,
that's interesting to understand as a coach, and, or, as, or when you're working with a coach is, and even if you're climbing with someone or doing something with someone who is better than you, is they are never going to be impressed by what grades you tick or what thing you do. They're going to be impressed when they see you stretch yourself and find something new. And yeah, I just think that's an important point.
yeah. I wanted to interrupt you, and I'm glad I didn't because you said it better than I could have said it. But that's the significance of people who are coaches in your life, and that's the significance of what friends can be, because people aren't there to just be impressed. They really aren't. I think you shouldn't be there. Yes, you, whoever is listening, you shouldn't be there just to impress yourself either. You should be striving for greatness, right? And what does greatness actually look like? It's not wowing because somebody said that Wheaties was hard, or somebody said that Wheaties was whatever. And I've had many, many arguments with many people, especially that's where the whole Yanya beef came from, where like I kind of said that, no, I don't think Yanya's the GOAT. And people were like, what? What do you mean Yanni's not the GOAT? And it's like, no, I just mean that right now, based on what she is doing, who she's doing it against, and what we're capable of seeing from her, she probably can't show us her GOAT status yet. She has to be put in those tough situations, and then in tougher situations, and maybe then rise to a certain occasion, right?
And to be fair, she's always asking for those boulders to be harder.
For sure,
She keeps saying, make them harder.
for sure, yeah.
Well, you brought up this idea of mastery, and I want to make sure we don't go too deep into the topic that was just our teaser. I mean, I don't know, it's all connected. Everything we do from minute one to minute end is connected. But it made me think of something that I've been going through where it's winter, it's snowing right now, and I've been getting out and skiing, and it's definitely taking me away from climbing. And I had my back injury, which sucks, dude. I'm better now. I'm like pretty much. I mean, clearly I'm going skiing and going off of jumps and stuff. But it's just this interesting thing that's connected to, especially the last episode, where should one go deep on climbing or a specific sport, or should you go and have fun at other sports? And I really struggle with this because it's snowing. Like you go out, I went out a few days ago, it was just this blower powder day and it was a blast, but I'm not that good a skier. Like I'm
Hmm.
okay, and skiing is fun, but it's not, I'm just not that good. And I see my friends who are a notch or two better and it looks more fun for them. And then I think about just how much time I have, as kids, business, life, climbing, and I realized I have to be a little bit more specific. And it makes me think about this idea of why even pursue mastery. Like what's even the light at, well, it's not even the light at the end of the tunnel. What's the fun along the way? And it's something that I think is a really interesting topic, because I argue that it's more fun to climb harder. It's more fun to do something at a high level than at an intermediate or beginner level. And then I think fun is the wrong word, because you do see this like massive progression when I start skiing. I'm like, oh, like now I can do this where I couldn't do it just last time. But as those gains get less and less in the thing that you do, they become more and more meaningful. Like because it makes me think of that quote from Joel where he said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's in those moments that when you push yourself into the uncomfortable state, that when you exit, you become different. And it gets harder and harder to become uncomfortable when you get better and better at something.
Hmm.
And, it's just something I've been wrestling with, because it's like, okay, like, do I just stay in here on the moon board, or do I go out and do like another, day of skiing? And it's not always clear, like,
Yeah.
and no one gives a shit if I get like, if I get
Hmm.
better at climbing, like no one cares. Like there's no real light at the end of the tunnel for me, even if I get better. And so it's something I've been wrestling with, and I don't have a good answer, but I lean towards mastery, man. I lean towards
Hmm.
specificity, And so I've been climbing a bunch on the moon board, of course,
That's
as I do.
awesome. Yeah, I would love to share some thoughts on this topic because this is a lot of like what I have spent most of my since I was like 13 years old, like philosophizing about, and that's why I kind of dove headfirst into the climbing journey. Because before climbing, I was playing a lot of basketball and like random sports, parkour, skateboarding. Like I was doing yo-yo, like fingerboarding type stuff, like all sorts of random activities that were all like type one fun. They were all for me like a very type one fun type of thing, and I lived my life like that, and I was fine. And when I was young, luckily for me, when I was young, and I think it was because of a lot of compounding life experiences at that point. I'd moved already like 8 or 9 or 10 times, I think, by that point. Like moved, not schools, but moved. And by that time I was like, it's time to take something seriously as a 13-year-old. And that's when the type two idea started to come into me, where it was like, well, if you invest now, maybe it won't be fun until later. And I think that's where climbing becomes really significant, where you can even treat climbing itself like either one of those two things. And I'm not using this time to say what's right or wrong. I think that's also the wrong way to look at this. But it's interesting to look at it from either a head on perspective or an end first perspective. And that's what I would challenge everybody who's struggling with that, which I always struggle with that. I'm struggling with it right now in the face of an injury. I'm struggling with that right now. And so what I do is I look at both. I look at it from, okay, what's going to make me feel best if I start from today and move forward? But then what's going to make me feel best if I look at the end and then look backwards? And what would I more likely want to do? Because I think that you'll find an answer that you're happier with. It's not about doing the type 2 thing because people tell you that being comfortable, being uncomfortable is worth it. It's not because of that, because it might not be worth it for you at that moment, right? But it's very important to be balanced. I think balance is really the key here. It's not so much about, oh, type 2 is better or type 1 is better. Dude, type 1 is super fun. It's fun to be there and like just have fun and not think too much about the consequences or the risk and the investment or whatever. It's also fun to, put a ton of work in through all the little nuances of spending time doing things, like you were kind of mentioning that some things get easier and that provides a little bit more fun. You can look, 100 reps later, 100 sessions later, and then see this type of progression that you may have never noticed. That's all great and stuff too, but value is based on where you are in your balance of life. That's my perspective and that's my philosophy, is that that's what value might be. So today for me, man, like it's not that worth it to invest in that type 2, right? I'm paying attention to my type 1, trying to just enjoy life, trying to enjoy like the little progressions, and it might help me to look at the type 2 aspect of it, but it's about balance in kind of in my perspective there. And that's what mastery is like truly about. I think it's balance.
This guy's definitely going through a core life crisis. I hear it.
Shit.
Tim, do you know what? So, type one fun is just fun for the sake of the thing, fun
Yeah.
right then. Type
Yeah,
two
yeah.
fun is when it's not fun while you're doing it, but it's fun in hindsight. It's more meaningful. Do you know what type three fun is, Tim?
Oh, no, no. Never
Type
heard of it.
three fun is when it's not fun in the moment. It's not fun when you remember it, but it's fun when other people hear about it. So it's those
Hmm.
epics that you never even wanted to do. You didn't have fun during it. You shudder when you think about how awful it was, but other people think it's fun to hear about. So
Like my highball thing or
I only is that you don't look back on that fun. Actually, dude, that's one of
no.
those things we've talked about, that where you have those memories of highballs and you just go, oh God, what was I doing up there? Like, thank God I
Yeah.
made it through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had the whole scale for sure. Yeah. Type 1, type 2, type 3. Maybe there's a type 4 that we don't know yet.
God, yeah. I
Type
I
4 is
have the
podcasting.
there you go. Oh man. I have this I have this thought about having a little boy versus a little girl. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that, but it seems to me like boys often go into these scenarios and they come out the other side of it and just dust themselves off, and they say, wow, glad I didn't die on that one. And I have way too many memories of that weren't things that I am really proud of, where, I've been in these highball situations. We've talked about this, where you find out what you're made of and you commit and then you come out the other side victorious. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, those make you who you want to be. But oftentimes you just have things happen that maybe like a giant boulder fell right next to you. You were, in some terrible kind of funneled location, hiking around like an idiot, and then you just almost died, and you're just like, oh, cool, I'm still here, and like, and I just worry about my son who seems to be more adventurous than my daughter, and I just pray that he makes it to the other side. He has this thing where he likes climbing. Thank God he likes climbing. And when I say he likes climbing, I mean he just climbs up onto stuff. But I'll see him climb up on stuff, and then he just falls off, and then he starts crying, and then he gets back up, climbs up, falls off again, cries again, and he just keeps doing this. And I just think to myself, is this good? Like, is that like, do I want my son to be out there doing things that are dangerous that he likely will get hurt from, and then he's somehow driven to just do it again and again? And it's this weird balance because, as we've talked about on the podcast, let's make climbing dangerous again. And it is part of the fun. It is part of the meaning, is risk and finding out what you're made of. But now on the other side, as a parent, I think, God, do I really want my kids to be going in there? And I guess, I mean, the answer is it's not up to me, right? You kind of
Mhm.
like set them free in the world. But yeah,
Wait, that's a
yeah.
really cool perspective because I think a lot of parents do feel like it's up to them, and it's for me, that was really fun just to hear about your perspective with your kids because, for someone like yourself who's gone through a lot of the experiences that you have, I think it's really cool. Like, I can't wait to meet Dax and Chloe again as they get older, because I met Chloe when she was really, really young, and she didn't, she was way too young. She had no personality yet, and I remember significantly. You and I got coffee one time, or actually, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if that was the time where I actually met her, but that I haven't met your kids when they have like a personality yet. Anyway, it's really interesting to hear that perspective. But I will say that from working with a lot of kids, and take this for what it is, Josh, and for everybody, this is just an interesting topic here. Um, it's much harder to teach kids to go for something than it is to teach somebody who goes for something and then inevitably gets hurt after doing it to then be okay being hurt. It's much harder. I'll repeat that. It's much harder to teach kids. It's much harder to teach young people or anybody to go for something. It's much harder to have that learned or taught, especially once you lose it. But it's a lot easier to teach somebody once they do that to then be okay with it, or to live amongst it or make better choices at the end of it. And so what a cool discovery that you're seeing from Dax, where yeah, it's worrying. I think from a parent's perspective, I could feel really stressed out. And I've even had like some similar conversations, like I told you yesterday, where one of my kids kind of expressed their first interest in like
Mm.
highball, and I was like, dude, I'm not even a parent, and I feel this like this crazy this whole weird responsibility, and we won't go into that topic today. Maybe we will, because that may be a fun topic, but I definitely feel it, dude. That's super interesting, and I hope it all. Yeah, I pray for the best for Dax as well. I hope he never gets hurt, but I also hope he
there,
never loses that, because that's so special.
there is a like some science behind where if you have something traumatic happen, well, actually the
Mm,
idiom is get back on the horse. And if you do have a fall or if something goes wrong, you should right away try to do it again and not have a traumatic experience, because if something goes wrong, that's kind of like the thing that gets laid down in your brain, like this is the path, this is the bad thing that happens. And so when my kids do fall off of a bike or something, I try to get them right back on, like literally as fast as possible. Like maybe they're just over being crying. I am not saying they like broke their leg. It's still like, oh, you skinned your knee. Like
mhm,
they're not
mhm.
hurt. And it's like, okay, let's bike again. Like not okay, you're scared of biking now. We will come back next month. It's like no, get right back on, because then I don't remember all the science behind it, but it's just like then that new pathway gets laid back over that, oh, it's okay. Like I'm back.
Yeah,
And it's just, yeah, don't cower and if something bad happens. I mean, look, if you gotta go to the hospital because you broke your leg,
yeah.
go to the hospital.
Yeah, you're pointing out that most experiences probably aren't as bad as they actually are, and so being able to even stand above. I saw this interesting thing from this like Instagram account that was kind of like parents help, and I promise this relates, but the parent basically was
What are you
explaining that.
doing watching these videos? I thought you were only having a quarter life crisis.
Shit. um, basically this parent was explaining that your reactions and how you perceive and show the impact of an experience is exactly what your kids will kind of that's how they're going to react. So if they hit themselves, even if it's extremely painful or a very significant thing, and you go, "Oh, I'm so sorry," they'll freak out and start crying. But if you go, "Oh," you laugh about it, or you make it kind of a joke or something, they'll laugh about it too. And even if it's the exact same experience, they'll react differently. And so it really matters for someone like yourself, Josh, to be the same individual and be like, "No, no, it's okay," and it's like, "Oh, let's just keep going." I think that helps the kids a lot to, share that same perspective, even if it is painful and even if it is tough, to be like, "Oh, no, no, dad says it's okay. Let's keep going."
Well, this is the thing that this that's great you said that, because it really connects to this overall topic. And it's this whole thing where what you think matters, what you say matters, and then what you do matters, and they're all really connected. You have to be careful around your thoughts, and also this is why your friends matter too. And I would say one of the things that makes me break up with friends are friends that are just miserable to be, always complaining. It's just like, even if you're right, you're wrong. Like, I just don't want to be around,
Mhm.
because it's like you were just saying, my kid falls and hurts themselves, that I'm still not going to be like, oh my God, are you okay, little baby? Because it's just, yes, they are hurt, but what's the point of
Mhm.
dwelling on it? And I give my poor wife, I give my wife crap about this. I'll see her bang her elbow or something, like bang her knee, and she's like, oh, I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? She's like, yeah, but it really hurts. I'm like, I don't care then. Like, are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital right now, or are you just complaining? Because I do this to, you like kick, you ever like kick the bed or kick,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
walking by something, you stub your toe, and it hurts so bad. And then you look and you're like, am I okay? I'm okay. Let's just keep going.
I get in so much trouble for the same thing. Relationship advice, guys. Pro tip: don't do that to your girlfriends, or just if they're hurting, they hurt, and it's okay that they hurt. You don't have to rationalize that it's not the most important hospitalizing experience. But
Also, by the
I feel
way,
the same.
it happens on crying wolf. Like, there's an element of crying wolf. My wife did
That's
slip
true.
and hurt herself, like land on a rock. And then I remember, like, 3 days later, she showed me this bruise, and I was like, "Oh my God, like, you got messed up there." And she was like, "Yeah, I was trying to tell you." I was like, I didn't know that you were actually hurt. Like, you were just okay,
Oh my god,
all
dude, that
right,
makes me crack up so hard. That's
yeah,
super funny because Jess, I met Jess before I met you. She was super, super nice to me when
oh
I was like
wow,
a V2, V3 climber, and she was friends with my mom. And she always struck me as just like the most nice person I'd ever met. And she was so understanding, so when it comes to like Josh just like pounds into submission, like, no, if it's not bad, it's okay. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll just go break my leg and it's not that bad then.
you gotta find that balance with your
Gotta
partner,
find that balance.
Yeah, but so I really do like, one of the things that's interesting about this topic for me is that when we were talking about, who are you when things don't go as planned, this idea of, vomit mouth, just saying a bunch of negative shit like, oh, it's too cold, this hole's too small, or whatever. I've definitely clamped down on myself and made sure that I am not someone who says these things out loud. And in fact, I actually am a big fan of doing the opposite, where I say, like, it's good today, or I feel strong today, or I will literally verbalize. I can't stand when people go like, oh, I didn't send because, like, it's too hot, or I didn't sleep well. And I'm just like, shut up. Like, it just doesn't help anything. So I literally try to get rid of my excuses by saying positive things out loud. But Tim, I wouldn't say that my internal thoughts are always that. They will be negative. And this is why it was an interesting topic to me, because I will see a climb, maybe on video or something. I'll think it's cool. I'll go there, and then there'll be some hold, like, oh, the crux hold is just stopper for me. Like, it's just, oh, it's exactly what I hate. It's a fucking, like, micro cramp, and it's gently overhand. I hate this. And it's just interesting how powerful, those, they seep into your mind. And then if you're the kind of person who then externalizes it too, then of course your actions are going to be bad. Like, how many times can you ever imagine a time where inside you said, this is going to be awful, and then you said out loud, this is going to be awful, and then it was amazing and you loved it?
Mhm.
It's like, no, like, that's not really how life works. You have to be careful. And So the topic resonates for me, Tim, because I I would say I still struggle with it. I'm a pretty positive and optimistic guy, but when I scratch down deep in the surface, that it's easy for me. I think it's one of these things too, where when you get older and you have these experiences over and over and over again, it's easy to fall into a rut. And very rarely are you going to meet someone who's like 40 and all of a sudden goes like, that weakness that I've had my whole life, I love it now. It's like that,
Mm.
it's hard to shift your mindset. And so I encourage people to, the younger you are, to take this stuff to heart. I'm glad that you're pushing this on kids, because that sets the tone. It really does. You are
Yeah.
a product of being young. So
Yeah. Yeah, I found this topic to be extremely fascinating as well, not just for my entire life. And, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it through life things, doing competitions, maybe not wanting to do competitions, but then wanting to do competitions again, going outside and playing the whole game of, testing yourself and proving to yourself that you might be doing something that's great or whatever. And I think like the reason why we want to talk about this was because everybody honestly the point is that everybody might be going through the same thing, right? And everybody might be going through something similar, and maybe this is tough to navigate, right? Like the point is that we've talked a lot about mindset, right? Like on the Testpiece podcast, and we've talked a lot about the significance of the mindset and whatnot. But here's a very specific perspective here. Okay, you're struggling with the comparison between the end result and your process, right? And we're a lot of the time, what I notice from countless moments and experiences of coaching people, and coaching people, I'll tell you this is it's definitely not easy. It's definitely not for everybody. And what ends up happening for a lot of the time you're coaching people is you're just going through the shittiest moments. Like you really are just going through the hardest moments. You're not hanging out in triumph for most of the coaching journeys that you have. You're hanging out in all the deepest, darkest moments where people are saying, "Okay, I'm not good enough. Okay, I'm struggling. Okay, sucks for me. This is stupid. It's not worth it anymore." And then the coach goes, "But what do you want? What do you want in the end? Because if you want something in the end, then clearly you're here for a reason, right?" But then also, I think good coaches point out all the truth, right? It's like, okay, well, not only am I trying to keep you on track, but here's just the brutal reality, buddy. Like, okay, so the problem is, and here I'll coach. I'll kind of talk about your experience, or like kind of the words that you just used, in the same way that I coach Vale. If you're stuck on the result, if you're stuck on the result, you cannot focus on your action, right? We want to be focused, and here, I'll explain why I see that. Is if we want to send a climb, we show up to a climb, we find all the information about it, we get experience from other people, and people tell us, oh, it's this great, it's supposed to be soft this way, but it's also hard in this way. You get all the information that you want. When you go, you're going to have your own experiences, you're going to have your own, opinions, and then you're going to make decisions, and you're going to make your own choices based on your own opinions. The problem is that you're going to react and you're going to feel what other people have told you, right? And that's where you need to separate there's no correlation between those two things. There's just a mental correlation, right? There's no actual correlation. There's just a mental one. This is for me where I felt the biggest jump in my competitive performance. My biggest jump in my competitive performance, seriously, at year 9 in climbing, was when I was able to see that when I would sign up and go to a competition, I deeply desired to be on top. I deeply desired, whether it was a result or a feeling of me walking away from the comp, that I put my best out there or whatever. That was the most important thing to me. How am I going to get that? Right? I had to sit on an airplane many, many, many hours on long drives and just ask myself the same question over and over again. Like, okay, here's what I want. How am I going to get that? Okay, here's what I want. I want to feel like this, and I want this to happen. How am I going to get that? And I reflect on all the moments that I've had in every single competition, youth events, overseas events, Seco block, like random events, or outdoor experiences. And I always come to realize that my actions, my choices, and my verbal reactions never had anything to do with the result that I actually wanted. They were just the negative reactions. They were just the reasons why I didn't do them, or the reasons why I wasn't good enough to do them. But I wasn't sitting there reflecting on what choices should I make? What choices do I have control over that actually might get me a better result? Because if we just do that and you compound that, you inevitably will get a result that you're probably happy with. The problem really in climbing in competition in sports that you can have access to that information is you focus on that, whether you know it, whether you think it, or whether it's proven to you in some sort of way through other people or other people's feelings. You feel like you know what the result's going to be, even if you don't have it done yet or you haven't worked towards it. You feel like you know what the result's going to be. The problem is when you start doing the actions that inevitably are difficult. Rock climbing is difficult, climbing hard is difficult, and winning a competition you know damn sure is difficult. And as soon as things get difficult, you start to fear that that result is not a reality anymore. Therefore, you react to those things. I think that's the truth that I've seen in lots of people. And the clearest example of that was I took these kids on the last trip, not this recent trip, but the last trip when they came in earlier December, right after I hurt my knee in Korea. I took the kids to uh, craft, and they just absolutely tore through all of craft. I put them on all these, kind of moderate classics, but they were just mowing through all the moderate classics, having a great time, no falls. I was like, wow, like they just racked up like 100 V points in 2 hours and each. And that was like super, super fun. And that's Vale and Abram. And they're both very talented kids. I mean, Vale went to Seoul to compete in the Youth World Championships because he got first and second in bouldering and lead. And Abram is a kind of a newer comp climber, and has climbed probably half as long as Vale has, but is just as talented in the gym and has outclimbed me on specific things in the gym. And I'm like, wow, what a freakily strong kid. I took them both to Black Velvet, where and on a day where Zach Galla was there, Nate was there, like a bunch of strong homies were there, and they're all confident people, and they're just doing their thing, they're just having fun, especially as friends. And they cannot for the life of them figure out Wet Dream, which is a V12. And they were even trying Sleepwalker with these guys. They were trying like all the other stuff. They could not for the life of them figure out Wet Dream. And I was just hanging out with my friends, just like then sometimes like filling in some info. I was like, yeah, just try this. Like, oh, you'll figure it out. And I walk away, and they're just getting pissed off. I just see it in their faces. They're like not sending. It doesn't feel good. It's cold. Like Tim's not helping them and stuff. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not there for you necessarily. I'm there to bring you to an experience, right? And the whole time for like 6 hours, they're just not making any real progress on Wet Dream. And I was kind of surprised. I was, honestly, I was really surprised. And that might have also been what was frustrating for them. But at the end of the, we had this whole conversation that, I kind of just had with you, which is like, why is it so frustrating for you? Because most people could walk to Wet Dream, not do it, and walk away feeling fine. But what's the frustration coming from, right? And that's where the truth came out. That's where it was like, well, somebody told Vale that Red Rocks was soft. here's the first thing Vale said. Vale was like, the problem is somebody told me Red Rocks is soft. Somebody told me that I would do Wet
Wet
Dream
Dream
really
is not
quickly.
soft.
Yeah, Wet Dream's not soft. I personally gave it a grade of 12.7. If it was like, the whole range of 12, I think it's harder than like a lot of 12s out there. It's also just hard to figure out. And it's also just, it was cold. It's hard for lots of reasons other than it just being a hard for a 12, and even if it was hard for 12, Vale and Abram should have done it. Honestly, even in that day, they still should have done it. And that was the whole conversation. Isn't that so significant that they walked away frustrated? And that was the one thing I pointed to. I said, okay, but we had a whole day. You're not even talking about the day. You're not talking about the moves. You're not talking about how you felt on the moves. You're not talking about, why you couldn't figure out a move. You're just talking about frustration. You're just frustrated, right? And so that's where I knew that things were blind, and we were just blaming things, and we were just feeling things. And we had probably another 6 hour conversation after that on the way home, hanging out the house. And these are complicated things, but that's the thing I wanted to point out was maybe we should dig into this. Maybe we should dig into this frustration.
Well, I think it's all really connected to this general idea of greatness or mastery, because I think that when I hear these stories, it's so tempting to have blame, or to think it's conditions, or oh, I'm not strong enough, and it probably is all of those things. But I think that some of the framing that you're putting around it is not being objective enough. But then the other side of it that I think is just really important to understand is that if you really want to get great at something, you have to go into those uncomfortable places. So don't see it as a failure. It's like, if you're not having those experiences, then you're not pushing yourself far enough where you're having problems. But then if you put that layer of kind of complaining and lying to yourself and whining, then you're not really embracing that this is the opportunity for you to learn and grow it. And I loved how you just talked about this process of knowing what you want, and then just saying, how do I get there? How do I get there? What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, like,
For
and
for
it,
some
yeah, yeah.
for some absolute clarity here, vomit mouth, that whole phrase, kind of what we were talking about earlier. For Vale in this case was the reason why the mouth was full of vomit and just like all the all this crazy. Most of it was it's hard to hear. It really is for me and for anybody. It would be hard to hear. I'm sure for him if he recorded and listened to himself, he'd be like, And granted, we talked about this, and I want to put only a positive note on this. I am not here to make fun of any of the kids that I work with. They're all lovely individuals, and here's the most important thing. Josh and I have thought about this stuff too, and we all are weak here. The point is to point out someone else's kind of hardship so that we can see what they've done beyond that. And a lot of it was negative, a lot of it was self-deprecating, a lot of it was it's taking away from his value, right? A lot of things that he would say, for example, were just things that weren't true, like, oh well, I guess I'm just not good enough, I guess I'm just not strong enough, I guess I need to go home and train, X, Y, and Z thing. I'm like, this is really interesting because you're using the language that happens to be true, but the way that you're saying it and the timing of which it's being framed shows me that it's a reaction, right? And I wanted to talk to him about this, and I wanted to say that basically the guidance that I gave him after this was it's okay. It's okay that those things are happening. But what I want him to focus on, what I communicated with through lots of conversation, what I still communicate to him with, I still communicate the same way. And I was actually very happy with this next trip. It was a lot better. But what I said was be confident anyway. Like focus your confidence through the hardship, right? I said failure and struggle is a part of the path to progression. Don't resist it, accept it, right? If you are someone like Vale, who's been climbing for since he was 5 years old. He's probably won a fair amount of competitions, right? Yeah, obviously he's probably not had competitions that were great, but when you're winning, when you're young, it kind of creates this false identity that you are great, right? And it's like, yeah, you might be great at some things at some times, but you are not great yet, right? To become actually great, you must be a wide factor of greatness. And when you're a kid and you're looking at yourself and you're using result to say, I must be great. I have all these gold medals, like these things come easily to me. I must be great. That might be true. Again, that might be true, but you're definitely not great in some places and in some ways. And that needs to be, you need to be humble, right? Either you need to be humble to then get that experience and then be confident beyond, which is then another experience that I explained through Abram. But with Vale, if you have this entitlement, you have to be ready to take the blow. If you have this entitlement of, oh, I must be great, like I've done all these things and I'm super psyched, like I'm going to go and try this thing, then that's fine. You can approach life that way and you can approach other experiences that way, but be ready for the inevitable. Be ready for the inevitable that something might teach you something, son, that you might not be good at something, right? And I think
Dude,
when you struggle with that digestive process, that's when it's hard. That's just when it's hard, is that layer you're talking about.
yeah, I the world will kick your ass at some point. It always does, and it just makes me wonder if you actually can. This goes back to the whole thing of coaching and everything. It's like, can you actually share that with someone, or do they actually have to kind of go through it, and that's where like bringing them into a situation where they get humbled. But I want to highlight something you said that was really, really important for that whole clarity, is that you may say these negative things about something that happens and they may actually be right. Like, you may need to get stronger. Maybe it was too cold or too hot, but that's not the point here. It's just because those things were true doesn't really give you it doesn't help you through to the next stage. Because if your lesson from there is that, oh, I just need to wait until it's easy, I need to come back when it's warmer or colder, wherever it is, like, and then it will be easy, and that's what I'm looking for. That's trouble. That won't really lead you the right way. And I don't know. It's just it's something that I think we all struggle with, and it makes me think of that Serenity prayer, the grant me the wisdom to
Hmm.
know what I can't change and the courage to change what I can. It's just it's this thing where, like, if you really want to be in it for the long haul, you have to acknowledge that there's obstacles, and digging into them is where like the joy is found. But it also just makes me think of that type 1 fun I'm talking about, where one of the problems with me going out and skiing is, like, it's really fun, but then when I start getting in my head about knowing what it could be like, because we're all like good athletes, it's like, so you go and you do some other sport and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool, I'd like to get good at it. But then for me, I think about what it would take to be a V13 skier. I'm just like, I'm not willing to do that in skiing because I know the journey and I know how long it takes. And you can't really do that with everything. And so it's, really understanding what that long path is it's a journey, and it's not found in just going from success to success to success. And I think it was really interesting where you pointed out that oftentimes when we have success and we've won competitions, and actually I would say that probably for the average person that isn't winning nationals all the time, which not everyone can win nationals, Tim. It doesn't happen. Sometimes you get second, uh, but it what I'd say is probably a more common occurrence that people experience in the modern climbing world is they crush it in the gym, and they go to the gym and they crush it and they crush it and they crush it and they are strong. Then they go outside and they don't crush it.
Yeah.
And they what do? A lot of times they stay in the gym. And I understand. Like, I'm not like, I understand. And if you're the kind of person who's saying, no, like my goal and my long-term goal is to only be in the gym and only to do comps, and then great. That's not what I'm referring to. It's just an analogy of, or not an analogy, just a common example where I see people. I mean, we often talk about it. I'm not going to blame you for not climbing in Yosemite that much, but it comes up with Yosemite bouldering, where Yosemite is right there for the Bay Area, closer than Bishop. But how many times do people go to Yosemite compared to Bishop from the Bay Area? Typically, is where I spend a lot of my time, and it's less because it's it's hard to find success there,
Yeah.
and it two
Man,
kinds of people.
you're picking
Yeah,
such a particular point about rock climbing, which I think is fascinating, and I think it's really interesting, and I think it's taboo to talk about. I do think that this topic here is kind of taboo to talk about because we're categorizing two major flaws. Sorry, we're categorizing a major flaw in like two groups of rock climbers who inevitably are good at one thing and then go to the next and they're like, I'm going to stay towards this thing that I'm good at, and vice versa, right? Because for me, it wasn't actually going from comps to outside. And then, actually it was mostly going from in the beginning, just climbing in the gym, to going outside. And then I started competing again and realized that outside was actually more fun for me. And outside was a little bit more pure for me. And I stayed competing because it was difficult. I even had a conversation with my mom when I was 17, and like right before I dropped out of high school, she was like, you know what, Tim, like Bishop clearly makes you so happy. I think I talked about this story on the podcast before, or with you, Josh, where my mom essentially offered to, work an extra job so that she could uh, take care of my life so that I could go live in Bishop and Dirtbag. And she was like, I know this is happier for you. I know that you would probably become a much greater climber. And she actually used those words. She thinks that she would see the most greatness for me for going just outside and not competing. And I was like, you know what, mom? I actually think, I told her obviously appreciated that. And that was one of the kindest gestures a parent could ever make. And I guess, now in hindsight, I also just didn't want a handout in that way as much. But more significantly, I told her straight up, the very first thing I told her was, I want to compete. I want to compete because it's so difficult for me. I want to compete because it's not so comfortable. Like it's not so obvious to me, like exactly I can't just warm up and get through my day and then try a bunch of hard climbs and then walk away feeling okay. I actually do have this vomit mouth experience at comps. I actually do have this experience where I come away from a comp, whether winning or losing, and I have no idea what I did. And I was at 17 and I was like, I want that. I want that hard life of frustration so that I can come out stronger in the end. And I think that's an experience that luckily I had, but not a lot of people are aware that maybe it's good for you to have that kind of tougher experience where you're a little bit more confused. And going that easier path won't show you anything. You can live like that for a long time, but it won't really show you that much. And yeah, climber, it makes me kind of sometimes sad actually to hear that some climbers kind of stay where they stay because they show this false identity. And for Vale, this was a very significant conversation. Going back to what we were just talking about, Vale destroys in the gym, like regularly, on almost every style that's on plastic. That's where the confusion is. The confusion is Vale took this opportunity to start climbing outside because people told him, this is the truth. because I think because people told him, or I told him, or some people kind of put it in his ear, or he just felt this, that rock climbing is also really important. It's important for your resume to look balanced, right? Not only do you win comps, but your resume looks like you can also climb outside. And he was like, oh, of course I can climb outside. He goes to his local areas in Washington, and he's destroying it. He's sending really hard stuff outside. He even comes here and he is destroying, dude. He was like one of the only ascents of Acrite. He campused it. He did Meadowlark stand
I,
super quickly.
dude, that Acrite campus was sick. I saw that video
Dude,
and I just thought,
he
ooh, I
also did
want to
it
try it like that.
3 times, because the first one I explained to him what a flying start was, and he was like, oh, you're right, dude. Like, that's not good. He did it again, questioned it. I walked away, and he was like, I'm just going to do it again because I know that Tim might have a problem with this ethic, and this style. And I was like, good on you, man. Like, that's so awesome that you're like challenging that ethic and really making sure it's good. But what's this other side? I'm like, no, but on these, like on Wet Dream, like you could have done way better, like on these little moments that you didn't focus. Like, I'm super hard on him, right? But I'm hard on him because he's got this false identity that he has this entitlement that, oh, I destroy things in the gym, I'm for sure going to destroy stuff outside. And it's like, that's the confusion. It's like, no, 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 don't compare the experiences, just have them, right? And if it's
Yeah.
hard, it's just hard, and we just figure it out, right? And we just do
I've
our best anyway.
Vale, I've been there. I've smashed in the gym. People are like, "Oh, Josh, that would be like V14 outside." And I'm like, "Okay," and I can't do V14. So I feel you. It makes me think of something we were talking about. We were just kind of noticing people freaking smashing lately. Like the kids are smashing. We actually were talking about Noah Wheeler, and his name came to mind when you talked about campusing Acrite because he campus defying gravity. And you talked about Noah a little bit, and he just went and did Sleepwalker. I think you were around
Mm-hmm.
for at least part of that session. But the reason why I bring it up is that I was saying to Tim, I was like, dude, like these kids are strong. Like we have seen something change. So kind of my generation, maybe you had Sharma and Dave Graham, and they were strong. They are strong, and I'm not. I mean, dude, Dave Graham is still, but I mean, like really physically strong. And then kind of like Daniel Woods comes around, and this whole era, there Jimmy, they're like really really strong, and I feel like it's still they're still getting stronger, and there's this like broader swath of kids in the I say kids, 16 to 25, and I'm just like, okay, wow, you guys are really really actually just as strong as any of these people have come before, if not stronger. And but when we talked about, we kind of said something where it's like there's the potential, or there's a hint that there's going to be something really special that's going to happen in climbing because of the strength over the next 5 years, 10 years. I don't know, V18, whatever, if you want to put a grade on, but that we both kind of agreed that it's not. It's a hint. There's a potential there, but that climbing is more than just doing this one problem fast or doing this one problem in a certain style. And that just because Vale did that amazing campus on Act
Mm-hmm.
Right 3, that problem's fucking hard.
Dude,
That doesn't mean you
so
just
hard.
it doesn't mean that just automatically like I am good, or I mean, I said this before, doing a grade does not make you even that great a climber. And I always hesitate when I say I'm a V whatever climber, because there's no way that I could go to any place in the world at any time and climb that grade. And also, like, I mean, dude, I could, like I've said, I can fail on V6 or V7, and it's just interesting hearing about this unbelievable potential that you see. But then we're kind of talking about realizing that potential over your career, and that you never realize all your potential, but this is the journey
Yeah.
that I think we're all on.
Do two things that I think are really interesting from this conversation. So that's for me why since I don't know, a couple years ago, I've really leaned into this thought that a belt system is far more appropriate to be used in climbing. Like I said, it's not exactly the idea of belts, because belts are used for martial arts, but that concept, the concept of telling you that you are a skill level because you are a skill level, not because you can do things, not because you can punch this brick, not because you can beat this person, not because of anything other than you are just that skill level. I think that's people are realizing in climbing that that's a lot more accurate. It's a lot more accurate to explain someone's skill level rather than what their resume is like, because there's a whole shit show of things that happens. It's like, oh, this guy's got this resume, like, oh, cool, let's put him on this thing. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily what's happening. Now you're going to notice all these cool things about this climber that are beyond their resume. But I wish we just highlighted that earlier on, because then we can look at it from what I've chosen to believe is that if I look at myself as a climber with this belt system, what I'm able to do now is to recognize what actually grants me a better status or a worse status. Therefore, I can actually look at myself in this way of working on myself, right? There's a lot of power in looking at yourself through this belt system, because you can actually see weaknesses and strengths or leaks, right? You can actually look at yourself in that way. If you just use a resume, then you just look at how long did that take me. Well, that can happen. That could have happened for a plethora of reasons. Like, which one did I do and which one did I not do? Well, that also can happen for a plethora of reasons that you cannot explain. But if you look at it in terms of, this is me, these are my weakest links and these are my strongest links, and this is me as a belt. What do I have to work on? I think you can see yourself in a much more workable light.
All right,
Um,
I'm gonna take the other side of this because I just don't like it. But here's why. I mean, I see what you're saying. It's not that
I'm
I don't see
interested,
what you're saying.
actually. Yeah.
Here's the two reasons why I don't like it. One is that it feels like a belt must get bestowed upon you, like it's something that a sensei or a master gives you. There's something I don't like about that, in that it's the people who I admire most in the sport push into the unknown and do things that no one has done before. And so this idea that there's someone on high that tells you where you're at feels a little strange to me. Even though I mean, that can be explained away in a different way. But I think that one of the things that's tricky is that different people have a different path in climbing. And I would say Alex Honnold has a black belt in mental calmness during dangerous climbing. Like, I mean, is there anyone who has the same level of poise when he's 2,000 feet off the deck with no rope? Probably not. And this is what I think is fun about things like 8a.new and these logbooks. And to me, it's just kind of like the fun thing of climbing and insider. I call it insider baseball. It's like, I don't know, looking at the resume is interesting because you might see someone did this climb in the heat in June. And you go like, whoa, that's different. Or whatever the case may be. Like, I think in some ways, what you go out and do try and put yourself up against and then come away from does kind of show you what kind of climber you are. And I don't know. I'm just being a
No,
dick.
I think
Just,
I think that's really
yeah.
cool. I think that actually points to a really significant part of like experiences, and that's another layer of climbing that can give us an opportunity that's a lot more important, honestly, than even a belt system or a resume system. Here's an interesting conversation that me and the kids had. So I kind of brought up this belt system, and they liked it, and they were like, "Well, what belt do you think I am? Right? What belt do you think I am?" I was like, "Oh, I think you're in this range of belts or whatever." And they're like, "Oh, cool, cool." So like, how am I supposed to get that next belt, right? And I was like, "Oh, this is an interesting conversation." Because and that's how I view it. I don't view it as a bestowing process. I don't view it as, okay, I want to become a belt. Now I have to go and climb in front of Tim, and Tim's going to grant me this belt. What I phrased it as between the four of us, the three kids and me, was, we'll all know. Trust me, man. We'll all know what belt you're at relative to the level that we understand. What we understand, yes, in martial arts, there's a cap to this belt system, but in climbing so far, now this relates to the previous point that you're making, we have no idea what people are capable of yet, right? But we kind of understand that like Sean Rabitou, Sean Bailey-ish, those types of people are in that black belt range. And so relative to them and all the little things that I see, I know where I am in belt status because I know it's possible, right? I know it's possible or roughly possible. Therefore, I kind of know where I am roughly.
Oh, so
And I think that's
maybe
where it's an
maybe what it is
understanding.
like it just keeps getting stretched out. Like whoever's at the
Yeah, for
top, it's
sure.
almost like the B. Remember that like bouldering system where it's like B3 is just the climb that no
Yeah,
one has repeated yet, and that's some. Yeah, I don't
exactly.
know. I mean, maybe I'm just not a martial arts dude. I'm just like I don't know the belts. I don't know. I see what you're saying
No, yeah.
though.
Well, there's no argument necessary there because it's not a system that's there. I just think that it's worth viewing climbing if we want to look at progression, if we want to look at like why grades kind of and sometimes create these horrible arguments that, in my opinion, at the end of it, no one wins. No one wins when we have arguments about grades. Um, we're not viewing this one aspect of climbing, which is people's skill status, which is a lot of things that people care about. But I do want to kind of, yeah, yeah,
No, the thing you made a statement. No one wins when people have arguments about grades, and I think that's just really true. And did you see that Magos just downgraded Sleeping Lion from 9C to 9B? I think yeah, like the
whoa,
double
2 grades.
downgrade. And it's just interesting because I mean I have no idea about anything about the grade. I've never even watched a
Yeah.
video of any or anything, but it causes this huge upsetness, and I'm sure Sharma is upset. Like I mean,
Mm,
how could he not be? And then I wonder if Magos is are his sponsors proud, like what's the
mm,
upside to any of this stuff? But it's such an important part of our sport. Like we've done freaking episodes on grades before. To deny that's not an important part of our sport is ridiculous. But then we also know that grading is totally inaccurate and doesn't
yeah.
quite work. And it's just this funny, like I guess now where I am, I used to take grades much more seriously.
Hmm.
I especially being into climbing and then setting. And I just really remember this thing where it's like, you're the expert here, guys. Like you grade it and you should know. Like you've gone and climbed 100 V10s. If this is a V10, you better fucking know if it's a V10, not just outdoors, but like setting and indoors. You say, this is V10 because I know this. And so I took it more seriously. But now, kind of as I get older, I almost look at it as like a fun part of climbing. Like I want to pick apart the grade with people. I want to talk about,
Yeah.
was it a 9C actually when Sharma did, I don't, or what, like, I
Mm,
think it's now it's kind of like fun, but I think people get too upset about it. And, that's where that belt system stuff, it's like, if you, okay, it was a V12, like, so what? So what? You did. Like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean
yeah.
anything? Like, no, that's not what we're really talking about. And so I like what you're bringing up here where let's try to get to like let's recognize the real core of climbing and the success and having mastery or greatness and not get too lost in the grades, even though it's kind of
Yeah.
appearing a portal into that
I
conversation.
mean, on that note too, the girl you brought and who just kind of destroyed Wheaties, would you really grant if you looked at 100 people who could send Wheaties and actually send Wheaties, they probably have a higher belt status than this girl. And you were kind of upset and you were kind of pointing out to her, like, be careful, be careful, be careful. You didn't suddenly get that belt status. That one actually just happened to come easily for you. And you were holding on to that core of like, hey, but it's more important for you to understand what belt status you're at, not because I'm trying to belittle you, not because I'm trying to point out that you're not good. It's because I'm trying to point out that you have so much more to grow. You have so much more of a potential because where you were able to climb shows your belt status isn't corollary to that. It's just a misunderstanding that we've used as a consensus. We all believe, a lot of people believe that Wheaties was V8, a pretty hard one. And so that when most people do it, most people showed their belt status, but you were able to recognize deeper layers to that and say, that wasn't hard enough for you. That wasn't exactly what challenged you. Therefore, that doesn't show you and grant you a belt status, right? And that's
I,
where I
I
like the
just
belt
I
status.
just want to be clear because in case she ends up listening to it,
Mm,
I actually wasn't really referring to her belt. I just my thing is that I just wasn't impressed. Like she wanted me
yeah,
to be impressed because she hit a new grade, but I wasn't impressed because I knew it wasn't hard for her. And
yeah, yeah,
that's that underlying thing you're talking about though. And yeah, God, that climb kind of is hard though. I remember
yeah, dude,
it's no
for sure.
joke.
I
Actually,
find I found it really hard too.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know if I've
but
done it now that I think about
it's funny that we
it.
talk about grades and kind of what you just said at the end of your grade spiel is like that's where this is significant is that we've turned this and it's so interesting to hear stuff like Megos downgrading something, because I have logical reads on this. The logical read is that he's super 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 strong, stronger in climbing muscles than most people have ever even believed possible or seen, right? Therefore, every time he climbs something, he's got a different perspective, man. He's got a different lens. His idea of a move that's hard or easy is just not the same. Therefore, we should listen to him, but he should also be totally aware of like what other people's opinions are. And that's why I really like Noah Wheeler's conversation about Sleepwalker grade, the way that he had talked about it. And he also just made a video on YouTube about it, and you guys should for sure watch that. But he kind of goes into the fact that there are 3 different betas, and that those are all different difficulties for different people. He also is totally in a place where he has got some of the strongest hands that I've ever seen in climbing. Not fingers, hands, right? I'm using hands as a very specific thing there. It's not fingers, it's hands. He's got super strong hands. And so Sleepwalker has all these crazy grips that kind of rely on hand strength. And for him, it looked pretty easy, man. Like I watched him just absolutely cruise all the moves, and I was like, well, that looks pretty easy for you. Therefore, I kind of want to hear his perspective. I want to hear his great analysis, right? I'm not going to agree with it. I'm not probably not going to agree with it. I'm probably not going to see it the same way. But we should listen to everybody, and there's no objectivity there. It's subjectivity. That's the point of grades, that people can give their opinion because they all have different perspectives, and it's just interesting. We shouldn't see them as truths. We shouldn't, and that's where I grew up also grade chasing for a long time. I really saw it as like, oh, I'm a level 9. Okay, I gotta do level 10. Okay, I gotta do level 11. It's like, oh, I gotta do level 12. And by the time I hit like level 13, I realized that these weren't real levels. These were levels that people had then given these climbs. And I was like, oh, it's so interesting though. It's interesting to push myself in that way, but it doesn't grant me a status, is like really where I think this is really significant. And talking about the dangers of following that system and really believing it and basing your choices and your decisions off of that. That's where this vomit mouth concept kind of comes from, right? That's where you really believe in that.
Well, and I just got to also point out, because you can take the other side of the argument with guys who are really, really strong, like Alex Magos doing something quick and not realizing maybe it was like a certain style for him. Like Chris struggled on that climb, and maybe he's getting older, and maybe he's lost perspective on what the
For
gray is. So
sure.
you know
Thought
that
about
that
that
can
too.
happen too. And it's actually it's this all is one of the reasons why I enjoy the moon board as a little microcosm. It's because the way that the moon board rankings work is it's your total score. So yeah, there's 500 benchmarks or something, and it's not where your top 10 flashes. It's or wherever your top 10 scores. It's how have you done 498 of them or 499 or all 500? And there's just something really cool about, like, you will find something that you think is easy, and you will find something you think is hard,
It's
and
interesting.
it gives you this like, okay, no, climb them all. And that's kind of how I looked at the moon. That's how I treat it, is I just want to climb all of them. And but to be honest, I kind of did that in some ways with Bishop. It was like this idea I had, like, you want to do all of the climbs, like, and then I don't know, that's not always realistic if you can't go there enough. But this is where you start thinking, like, I want to do all of the cool climbs, like all of the proud climbs or something, or the high balls or something, right? And I like that style of looking at the map and then filling it out entirely and saying, okay, like there's a lot of
Same here.
unknown here. Like, now let's do it all. And the climbers who take that approach often are very successful. Carlo doing did the dark side in Yosemite, and it's V16, and he did 514 trad in Yosemite as well. And that's like, you can see how cool that expansion of thought and what's available to him to test himself on is. And I'm sure that his first time up Magic Line or Meltdown probably wasn't like, oh, this is easy, I love tiny thin seams, and like, I'm totally in my wheelhouse. It's probably like, oh, okay, got to learn something here, because this is different.
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about Carlo like significantly when I've been thinking about these like concepts of mastery and like true greatness, simply because he has this approach of balancing himself and like seeing and looking for the things that maybe he doesn't understand. And I love that concept of map filling where it's like, oh, well, I can't just go to the touristy spots that everybody tells me to go. I have to really do my research and really explore these places that I have to go and see for myself. And I think that's really what climbing is. Climbing really is about, searching the deepest. It's almost like in a weird way, it's kind of sad that a lot of climbing has like already been done. Like a lot of my sadness for my own climbing comes from the fact that I'm repeating like so many things, and I'm so jealous of like all these people who experience like some of the best rock. Like seriously, some of the best rock has been. There's a lot of rock that hasn't been explored, but some of the best rock I would argue probably has been explored. And there's like some great thing that you can find about yourself, and it's I would say that it's just easier, probably easier, arguably easier to get to that pure experience. the pure experience of rock climbing, which is that kind of map discovery, the finding the inner and like really trying to get that out, and having this whole vomit mouth experience, which happens to only come after you've tried to repeat a bunch of things. Because I would argue that if Vale had the opportunity to be one of the first rock climbers and was really talented, maybe he wouldn't have that vomit mouth experience. Maybe he'd have a different experience, right? And maybe it would not be good, but it could be a different experience. And I always envy like people who explored early on.
I mean, I got to point out, you can just go up to a climb and have never watched a video, or even, I mean, you could just not take a guidebook, but people just don't do that. I, I, I will say that some of my more memorable experiences, I'm not a big first ascensionist. Maybe as I get older, maybe I'll change my tune, but I never had the time. It's like, okay, go up on the weekend, like do this classic. But some of my better memories were when I would go out with my crew and we would repeat something that was brand new. Like I remember doing luminance early on, and it just it'd been done like 2 times or something, and
Yeah.
you don't, there's no video, you don't know, you just don't know enough about it, and so it definitely does feel like this, who knows what's going to happen. And actually in the example, luminance got put up at V11, and I think it's settled at like V8 or
Nine.
V9.
Yeah.
But like, that just goes to show you, we didn't know what to expect, right? Like, and it's interesting when you walk up to a high ball that's dangerous and scary, and it gets V11, which was close, not too far away from my top grade at the time, and like, how do you handle that? And so, yeah, I mean, dude, going out adventuring, it's something that uh, Joel was talking about. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that pod yet, Tim, but Joel was saying that one of his issues with setting in gyms now is that they're kind of in this echo chamber where there's so much indoor climbing. These people who are setting have come up, setting in a gym, climbing a gym, watching crazy moves on Instagram, trying to set them. And it's very different from the era before, where setters were usually these kind of lifers, climbers. It's like they go to font, and then what they bring back from font. And actually, he talked the story. He shared the story of Steve Monsanto going to Waco and then bringing back the V scale. Like, oh, look at what I found, and they
Wow.
set like a V6, and it was like
Dude, epic.
thuggy and like different. And just that point is that broad exposure to different experiences really makes you grow. I mean, again, it just is
Mhm.
all tied back into, it's like, go to that uncomfortable situation, and then instead of responding with a bunch of negative talk, embrace it. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's where your growth is going to be found, is when when things don't go quite as they
Yeah.
expected.
It's funny that you bring that up, and that's actually super cool to hear about. Maybe some issues that route setting has from someone like Joel, who's how do you know how old Joel is? He's a couple
He
years
is
older than me, right?
45 now.
He's 45. Like that, from that era, hearing somebody's perspective, because I really thought that climbing, my understanding of the arc of climbing, or not an arc, but like the whole sine wave that climbing is, uh, understanding in climbing, like truly understanding what climbing was and what climbing is, was mostly done a long time ago and maybe a couple years from now. But so far, everything in between, we've really not understood climbing very, very well. Maybe a few people have been continuously pushing it and kept it pure. Like Dave just is like always in some cave somewhere in Europe and like always is
Dave.
doing himself, right? Therefore, he's maintaining that purity in climbing. But for all of us who are on Instagram, Kaya, like all this stuff, it's harder to keep that purity of climbing, right? Which is why I like this podcast, because we try to dig deep on
Well,
like what's missing.
and let's peel a layer back on that, where when we talk about purity and climate, it's not exactly like,
Hmm.
oh, you need this like soul experience. I think something we've always talked about in this good to great process is that you have to go into yourself and be unique and find out what your own style is, look at things through your own eyes, and really develop yourself versus just
Exactly.
copying. Like, is very,
Exactly.
I want to say it's easy to go out and just repeat a bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
Like, it's definitely is impressive to see, Noah go out and do Defying Gravity and Sleepwalker. Like, I am not, I color me impressed. I am really impressed. But I, it's still kind of TBD whether Noah will go and
For sure.
be Noah. like the
For sure.
Noah that we all talk about in 10 years because he found something deep inside, and you just aren't going to get that scrolling through Instagram and doing what everyone
Totally.
else is doing. You're not
And we
going to
can
be a
expect that.
legend, you know. Yeah,
We
go
can
ahead.
expect that from Noah, but it's not a given that he's going to become that,
We
right?
can
He still
hope.
has to. We
Yeah.
can hope, yeah,
Eh,
yeah, and we can believe that too. But he still has to go make those choices. I think that's what I've noticed from competing, coaching competitive young people, coaching even older competitive people, and looking at the corollary or the differences. That's the biggest thing I've noticed in the last like 10 years. I've noticed that kids struggle, like kids nowadays struggle with concepts that are not the same concepts that I used to struggle with. The concepts that kids struggle with nowadays are through identity, creativity, believing in consistently over times, right? That's what we're talking about today. To point it back to what our conversation is what did these kids struggle with while they were out rock climbing? Literally just rock climbing. It's like it shouldn't even be a conversation of struggle, dude. It's the trip should have been, hey, these kids are coming to have fun. But it's like, no, they're so focused on progression. They're so
mm,
focused on proving themselves that I have to point out the issues on that path, right? It could have been fun, but it's not focused on that anymore because they're so addicted to that progression. I don't have a problem with it, but when we do that, we're gonna notice what the shortcomings are on that path to greatness, on that path to being the best, on that path to proving yourself. And the problems that I notice are exactly what you're talking about, which is if we have too much of a focus on copying or replicating success or whatever versus exploring what we're truly capable of, explore like truly, and that word
yeah.
truly capable of is really important because you don't know what you're capable of until you really ask, right? Until you really ask and then ask again and ask and ask again. These kids don't do that enough because they're focused on repeating, they're focused on proving and testing themselves, and that's I guess that's why I point out the sadness in, if you're a kid starting today, it's going to be hard to have that pure aspect unless you check it and have good friends and good
Well,
coaches, of course.
I don't. The only reason why I don't like that idea that if you're starting today, you know, you're never at a disadvantage. Like
Mm,
it's not that if you start today, you're somehow worse off from people coming 10 years before, 20 years or 30 years before. Because let me tell you, the gym I started in sucked. It was just sucked, and I
that's a
had
good point.
blast. And just to liken that thing that seeing Noah do Sleepwalker to what I was talking about with that girl who did Better Eat Your Wheaties. So the whole thing is like, wow, that's amazing that you repeated Sleepwalker really quickly, but it's not like, oh my God, like Noah repeated Sleepwalker really quickly. It's like, it
Mm,
wasn't that hard for him. Like,
yeah, yeah,
should we be really impressed with that? Like, and it actually makes me think of talking to Katie Lamb and what she was inspired by and what she pursues in her climbing are when it comes to a groundbreaking send, it's not, oh, I repeated this in a day. It's wow, like I had to dig to the deepest depths of my soul and I thought I couldn't make it. Like I thought it wasn't even gonna happen. Like I banged my head against the wall for 20 days and then finally everything clicked and it worked out in this specific moment. Like that's what you remember. And so yeah, I don't know. It's funny hearing about kids and just kind of being really goal oriented. And I totally was as a kid. I wanted to climb, 512. I wanted to climb 513. I wanted to tick these off.
yeah.
But now looking back, with hindsight, like 25 plus years, 30 years, the moments that really stick in my head are actually those times where I was really scared and I pushed through. I really, I mean, I don't know what to say. Like I was scared lead climbing. I'm like 9 years old and I'm like, and also I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think bolting used to be more sparse and,
Yeah, yeah.
like doing heinous cling in, that was my
And
first
Smith.
12A in Smith. And dude, it's spaced out. Like it is not bolted closely. People didn't have the money. It was just there was an ethic there of not scarring the rock with a bunch of bolts. And just I think there's something to be said for, I don't want to call them traumatizing moments, but things that really were deeply intense for you as a kid often come back later as being some of the source of inspiration. And it's actually, I think, why gymnastics was so pivotal for me as an athlete and maybe as a person is that when I got into higher levels of gymnastics, you just reached this world where you kind of had to go for it and your coach couldn't be there to kind of hold your hand through it. Like if you're a little kid and you want to do a backflip, your coach can just pick you up and make you do a backflip, or you can jump, do it terribly, and they spin you around. They go, "That was dumb, but you're fine." Then you do a double backflip, and you're a bigger kid. They can't really catch you, and you have to commit. And it's those moments where you are uncomfortable and then you dig deep that are really stick out in your brain for the rest of your life. And so yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
I could probably
No,
connect
no.
that to the topic at hand, but
I would
I think
I
that's
would
important to
yeah.
stand alone.
I would love to do that actually because that's the point, right? The point is that I love hearing you kind of talk about it in that way because it's almost like validity. It's like Josh is saying, okay, well, yeah, after you do it for 25, 30 years, you look back and you're like, damn, like what are the moments that stuck? What are the moments that shaped me? What are the moments that are the most important, right? And then we zoom into the kids now, and the kids are like vomit mouthing because they're going through those experiences, right? And so my point and my goal and my job is to provide the clarity. It's like, no, 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 but those are the most important things. And don't shit talk it because it's hard for you. Like, don't be afraid of it and don't walk away from it. Do it again. Do it again and be amongst it. Be above it, right? Like, be with it. Like, be confident through it because that's the point, right? To show that to a kid and have them truly believe it is one of the most beautiful things, right? To see them grow up as a person and say, all right, okay, cool. Like, this is good. And to see them come back to Red Rocks, that actually was the biggest thing. Was I actually find myself apologizing as a coach more than anything, which is super funny, right? Because it's like I'm obviously just trying to provide help and like try to give experiences, right? But I actually just end up apologizing. Why do I apologize? Because I believe these people, not just the kids, to almost anybody that I work with, actually, I end up apologizing because they have a hard experience. And I don't take back what I say. I just say, I'm sorry you're going through that. I'm sorry that that's tough for you. And I'm sorry if I provided a moment for you that was frustrating and I provided a moment for you that's this. But I think you can go beyond. And I think that, it can be good for you. And I think it's important to look at it personally as everybody, to look at it in themselves like that, where it's like, I guess this is just difficult, but maybe it's the right thing. Because if I go through this process, it could be good and it could be bad. I guess that's like the biggest message that I have today is that it could be really good, right? And that's an obvious thing that Josh and I agree with. But I'm actually trying to point out that it could be bad, right? It can be destructive for you. It can be destructive to grow those toxic opinions that maybe aren't objective and true because you don't understand. You're going to say a lot of things that you definitely don't understand because you definitely don't understand. And then by the end of it, you might believe those things, right? I always have told Vale, sorry, I'll end it here. What I told Vale a lot, and I told him this on the last trip the most, and I kind of like circled back so that he can kind of hear it, is if you argue for yourself, if you argue for yourself and you tell yourself that you aren't good enough, if you tell yourself that you can't do it, and if you tell yourself that it's too hard for you, guess what? You're going to win. You're going to win that damn argument. You're for sure going to win that argument. If you tell yourself you can't do it, if you tell yourself that you're not good enough, you tell yourself it's too cold, you tell yourself it hurts too much, guess what? You're going to win. But if you argue the other side, if you argue for yourself to be better, to be stronger, if you argue for it, you're for sure going to win that argument too. So be careful what you argue with because it should be something that's in line with what you actually want, right? And you have to sometimes be less emotional to realize what you want. You have to be emotional to fuel the choices that you make for sure. But if you're emotional in looking at the end, the North Star, if you're emotional looking at the North Star, you might not see the North Star, right? And so it's really important to piece those two things together, where I am today and where I'm supposed to be, and understand what could be destructive or what could be helpful, right?
Well, and if you're going to be emotional, be optimistic. But
Right.
like it's always going to be this. We talk about this all the time. This balance between optimism and being honest with yourself, being cold hearted and objective. But I just wanted to share a little story about a success story. And actually, before I say this, I caught some flack on Instagram about they compared me, or maybe it was you, Tim, to the normocast, and that we talk about climbs that we did, and we just are like patting ourselves on the back. But I'm gonna tell this story, and
Ouch.
I think well, it's like, but the reason why it really bothers me, and maybe it's different with you, is that when I talk about my climbs, I think the one they're referring to is when I was talking about some on-sighting some 512 in Kalimnos, and I was like using that. We were talking about like boot rubber and committing to a crux, and I was just like, does this person really think that I'm bragging like about
Mm,
like that I'm really proud of a five? I think that's where like the disconnect may come from, is that you know, we use these stories for analogies or to teach a lesson, but I guess because I've been around so many great climbers, like I know I know that what I do is not impressive. So if I'm telling a story and the grade comes up wherever, it's like part of the thing. But you
Totally.
know, no one should be very impressed, or please don't think that I'm very impressed that I onside a 512. That is just not podcast worthy. So that was my disclaimer as I talk about my experience on Loscott, which I've talked about Loscott and Two Smoking Barrels, but I've never told the story. And this is this deep water solo in Mallorca, and it culminates in a big all points off dyno at like 35 feet or whatever. And then you grab a big jug and then top out Cova del Diablo. So I really want to do this climb. And it was starting to get to the end of the trip. And that day I was like, like I'm tired, but I should like go out and, you know, check it out just in case. But the forecast was really bad. Like the surf was supposed to be high. And before that, I'd had lunch. I had like eaten a ton, had like Aperol spritzes. I think even smoked some cigarettes because it's Europe and it's healthy for you there. Uh, so we drive out and I'm like not going to climb, man, but I'm like, I should just show up and do this. And like, I'm connecting this to the topic because I'm just full of negative thought. It's like, oh, like, I mean, I just
Mm.
ate, like, I've been, you know, had Aperol spritz, like, I should not be here. But I just kind of like went out there. I look, the surf is high. It looks bad. It's probably wet too. Like when the surf is high, like the waves crash. And so I'm certain, and no one's there. And my wife was there, and she wasn't going to go down there with me. And so it's dangerous, right? You don't want to do this stuff on your own.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm like, okay, I don't have to do anything. I'm going home. You know, woe is me. Like it's not my fault. Go out. I'm leaving. Some guy starts walking out, and I find out that he's going down there, and it's like his first time. But I'm like, okay, like there's someone's going to be there. So I go down with him. I know I'm going to have like one good rip while I'm like dry, and I go over. I jump, I really set up good. Like it happens to be dry, like it's not that bad. And so I'm like, okay, give it one go. I latch the jug, I swing out, and right at the apex of my swing, I peel off and I just rip the most savage flappers you've ever seen, Tim. I'll link you to like my Instagram post. I mean, like huge holes, just squirting blood, like bad.
Wow.
And I go to like the place, like I'm drying off my towel. There's just blood everywhere, and I can't put tape on because my hands are like wet. I don't even have tape. And so, you know, like I'm done. And then I'm like, well, like, what's the worst that can happen? Like my hands, I already like, you know, ripped holes in my hands. Like I should just try it again. But like everything in me
What?
was like, don't do it. Right. Like this is dumb. You're done. You know, it's over. And then I go and I just try. I'm like leaving like a trail of blood along. Sorry, whoever climbed it after me, I feel bad. And then I stick the move, dude. And I'm like, holy shit.
Wow.
Like, and I get all psyched. And then I go for the ending. It's probably just like a V5, but I don't know what I'm doing. Like I've never seen it or rapped down it. And I get to like the very last move. And I've seen people biff this move because it's not clear what to do. And I stick the like 2 finger pocket barely. I'm like swinging around and I fucking top it out. And it was so the reason I bring this up is it was so meaningful to me because it was one of these times where everything was negative and like I shouldn't I had like 10 excuses. Like I could have just walked away and been right to walk away, but persevering and not saying like this sucks. Why did it have to be bad weather on my second to last day? Like why like damn, like this oh, I tore a flapper. I don't even have tape down here like and now I'm wet and everything. But just showing up and continuing to do it and then it working out like that's what sticks out in your head and like that's that thing you want to ingrain, right? Like that's what I want to remember, that's who I want to be, so that the next time I run into something negative, that it's like, okay, well, remember that time when you thought everything was going bad and then you dug deep and you had success? Maybe it's one of those times.
Mm.
Maybe it's one of those times. And so I just, yeah.
Oh, what a good story. Oh, that story's so good. Dude, I have so many moments. I know Brennan will have this flood of nostalgia when, when he hears this, but we've just had so many moments that are like somewhat similar. That's an epic moment for sure. Because it's like, why? First of all, why would you pull back on after you're just like bleeding? But I mean, that's super epic. Like basically, what it was is that either two things happened, right? Either you didn't care and you were like, well, fuck it, let's just see what we're made of, or you believed. You literally just believe through all the hardship. You believe. Now I'm willing to believe that it's that one, but that's because that's what I always ran into. Was for some reason I would always be really psyched to night sesh. For some reason I would always be psyched to like strip to my boxers and just like be super super cold. But especially towards the end of the session, like especially towards the end of the session, where like whatever, dude, like it's not already happening. The amount of times I would send something that was like end of session or after all the homies would fall and like after all the homies kind of quit and gave up, and I'd be like, all right, this is my chance now, because why not believe? I think that's like the most significant point there, is like when things kind of lead to a moment where you shouldn't believe the most, that's really when it's up to you to believe. And that's really the only thing that's going to keep you going, is maybe what your opinion is on do you believe or not. And that's, I think that's also what you were trying to say when I was talking about belts, that maybe that experience, that moment, that little choice and that little situation is more important than all the skill, all the belt, and all the resume. Maybe it's about that one little moment where you say, all right, all right, all right, all right. Is this going to be the moment? Is this going to be me? Is this going to be the choice that I make here? And you're right, man. I think that's just as significant as, in my opinion, it's just as significant as everything else. If you don't have that, if you don't have that little thread, you may not find that greatness. And that, I think that story is so awesome. And that's also something that I definitely don't see as much in the kids. I definitely don't see that as much in the common era nowadays. And that maybe because they're struggling. And that's what I chose to coach. That's what I've been choosing to coach, is to instill belief amongst young people, so that in those little moments, it's not about me saying, don't you want to try again? It's not about me being there and being like, oh, I can offer lights. Like, are you hungry? Are you cold? Like, I can offer this. It's not about that. It's about saying, okay, well, Tim's not going to help me. Okay, well, Tim isn't that psyched to stay out here. Could I do it? Because maybe he believes that I could be that person based on everything else that we've gone through, right? Because those are really the moments, those are like really truly the moments that we look back on as we get
Well,
older.
and I like what you said there about how, telling someone to try one more time when you're there. Like, I mean, maybe it's good that you instill that and they get used to it. But you asked me about, was I just Hail Marrying the last try, like, or half-assing it? But
Mm,
no, like I was actually really trying and committing.
yeah,
And that's that thing, like when you say, okay, one more time, that you actually are showing up for it and doing your best, and building that muscle, I think is really important. And it really does compound over the years, and makes me think of three buddies of mine. So when I was in college, I met you, Tim, but or no, actually I met you after college, but I was also climbing with some younger kids who were the only ones who were willing to drive over the Santa Cruz Mountains to go climbing at PG Sunnyvale. And they were like 15 or 16, and there was three of them, and they were all very different. And one was just brutally strong, terrible footwork, but he just could bust out one arm pull-ups like never even training for them. One was just this lanky, just he was the strong one. Even he was lanky, had strong fingers and good technique, and he was the one who kind of was the top dog in that group of three. And then there was one guy who just wasn't that great at anything. He just was good. I mean, he was just psyched, but he just always showed up. He was never super negative or super positive. He just kind of like showed up and enjoyed himself. And uh, now, gosh, like, I don't know, 15 years later, he is an incredible climber, and the other two have disappeared. But were
mm,
you to try to pick out who was going to be the successful one, it he, I mean, maybe now in hindsight, or maybe now knowing what I know now about what it takes to progress over the long term, maybe I would have picked him because of that mindset. But just physically, you
mm,
would think he wasn't going to be the one to succeed. And now he is an incredible climber. And it's just, it goes to show you how over the course of your climbing career, it's mindset and bringing that intensity to every situation and bringing that right mindset to every day that really builds up and makes you who you are. And so that's why we harp on it, you guys, right? Like
yeah,
it's because like a hangboard protocol lasts for eight
mm,
weeks. But who you are as a climber, uh, or who you build yourself up as a climber each day, is what really last those decades. And climbing's hard, and it takes decades. And that's why even when
yeah,
you see the success with guys like Noah, or Vale, they're young. Like, I'm not saying they're not incredible, but it's like it's still TBD. It's like, come back in 10
yeah,
years, are you Daniel Woods? Like, or is your name up there or not? And it's not going to be just this one send that makes everyone remember you, or that one
Yeah.
competition win.
Man, I think I love this conversation of the lead domino, right? Like the conversation that I like that Josh does a good job of rounding out our conversation to kind of lead us to this point. Because I like talking about all these little things that I'm noticing, but Josh really does a good job of pointing out. It's like, well, but this is why we're talking about it, right? Like we're looking for the lead domino that gets you to greatness, right? Like that's what we're looking for, right? Like that's what we're interested in. Whether we do it or not, we are interested in, but what is the true optimal path to greatness, and what does that look like? Because it's not easy. It's not straightforward. You and I have gone through many experiences. Everybody's gone through experiences to see what ways not to get to greatness, right? And what things might disrupt us to get there and what things might help, right? And the true thing that I've always talked about with these kids, and I've talked about this on a podcast before when I was talking about this like process for performance, right? This is I've talked about this before. It was like, if you want to perform, right, in an ideal sense to perform, what does that look like, right? And it's a clear headspace. The optimal place for performance is a clear headspace. Well, but what does clear actually mean? Clear isn't strong. Clear isn't, you being in Majorca going down to that cave and having an ideal day. It's actually believing in the truth, right? It's actually believing in the truth of what you're capable of, what the realities are, the good, the bad, and then making your choices, right? And for kids, and that's why I think this whole and great way to round out this podcast is, well, what took away clarity from these kids? Well, a lot of expectation, a lot of comparison, a lot of entitlement from climbing in the gym or like seeing what grade you're supposed to climb, right? Well, that stuff's definitely not going to make it clear, right? So, how do you provide that clarity? Well, that's for all of us to figure out, right? Climbing is incredibly complex. Whether you compete, whether you do it outside just on rock, or whether you just care about the moon board or anything, we're not here to judge that. We're talking about the good and the bad from doing those things. And that's for up to you guys to decide whether it's worth it for you or the value systems in your life. The whole type 1, type 2 conversation that's for you guys to, apply to your own lives. But truly the thing that I want to speak about, or the thing that Josh and I always want to speak about is, well, we kind of understand roughly the path, the lead dominoes to performance, or at least we're talking about it in a way that maybe we see some similarities to the more optimal places to be. And in order to do that, you have to understand the complications, the complexity, and the difficulty of what rock climbing is. Because I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is that they think that, oh, well, these people shit on it and they make it look so easy and they're just so good and it looks so easy. So if I'm going to do it the right way, it's got to look easy, it's got to feel easy. Well, that's the first misconception, right? The first misconception that most people have in rock climbing is that if I'm doing it right, it's going to look and feel easy. That's just not true, right? It's always
That
difficult,
is
and
some type 1 fun, though, when you can just cruise
yeah,
up stuff.
it's
There's some
nice
type
to
1 fun there.
it's
It
nice
is
for us
nice
climbers
sometimes.
who are good to then like explore that type 1 fun. But no, truly those moments beyond where you need to muster that belief, that's really where you see the quality of a climber and you see the skills of a climber.
So I just want to point out something really important there. Well, two things. This podcast is in general about good to great and mastery, but is not us telling you how to go from good to great and how to find mastery. It is the journey that we are on and looking for, and asking people who are on that journey, or maybe we even consider great as well. So yeah, I just want to make sure that it's clear that we're just trying to discover that as well. But the other thing that I think is really important is that along that way, it's some in some ways it's easier to say where not to go, right? Like it's don't do this. Okay, like I feel like we're far enough along in our journey to say, like, okay, like this is not the path, right? Or this takes away from the path. This takes away from the path, and in some ways it may be this personal journey of everyone, and there is no right distinct way to go, but there often are these commonalities of, like, yeah, like, don't, you know I don't know, I was trying to come up with something like drinking and smoking, and I was basically saying how I like drank and smoked my way up to the top of Loscott. uh but I think it is important, though, that in some ways that's what a lot of these topics end up becoming is, okay, this doesn't seem to work, and here's why. What hints does that give us about what does work, right? So, and I thought that was, it's funny, Tim. Yeah, I had all these other things I wanted to talk about in the beginning that were lighthearted and mellow, but somehow this really is another classic New Year episode where it's like, dig deep, find your passion, go at mastery, dude. Like, just but I do like that messaging, because I know we all get off of our rhythm during the holidays, and you know eat too much, don't train as hard, and then you go like, wait, like this isn't me. This isn't who I want to be. And then it is nice to. So I feel like some of our messaging has been around that, but it's because that's what we're going through right now, right? We were off during the
Yeah.
holidays. Tim, you got injured. I got injured. I ate a lot, and I haven't been pushing it hard. Now I'm like, wait, is that me? Like, is that who I want to be? I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Now I know one more thing not to do to go down that path, and that's like eat
Totally.
gingerbread cookies every day. So yeah, that
Yeah.
good stuff,
And I
man.
think
Appreciate it.
I also think yeah, that being said, it's I also had other things that I wanted to say, but it's always fun to just follow the conversation where it ends up being. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this kind of more, maybe a more unique take on this type of conversation. But um I think this is the most fun way to do it, is to talk about these things, right? Because again, we're not talking about total truths and facts and whatnot, but experiences, right? The experience is that I just took a bunch of kids out after the new year. I'm injured, I have my own climbing life and stuff, and then I watch them do their experience. And what do I notice is somewhat of a failure in the identifying process of their perspectives, an unchoosing to fix it, and and then a reaction of it, right? And then what I'm excited to see is, what do they do for the rest of their lives, right? Now, because I want to turn this into a positive, right? Because I've done the entire podcast of just roasting these kids, but I don't see it as roasting either. I'm just pointing out, like I could do the same thing on myself and way worse, but this is a real experience that I've having with these kids. I am extremely proud of them. I make sure I say that, right? But on top of that, they have work to do, right? And if I can point out that work and they can believe in it, point it out themselves, identify it, fix it, and then handle your reactions properly, right? And that being said, this we talked mostly about kind of Vale's vomit mouth concept, and Abram had this whole vomit thought concept that I don't want to go into now. Maybe we'll come up with it in another podcast. But there's no right way to life. There's no right way to winning. There's no wrong way to it either. There's just life, and you just go through it. And it's about identifying those things, working through it regularly, because the path to greatness is it's a long one, and it's a hard one, it's a confusing one. And if you guys are curious about it, I think that's the way that we should look at it, and we should talk about it, right? Because people are alive, and people are always going through things and discovering things, and we're all, climbing. Like I said, is kind of why I was talking about it earlier. Is we have no idea what climbing is, but we know for damn sure that, well, we don't know for damn sure, but I have a feeling, and Josh has a feeling, and a lot of us have a feeling that we're definitely on the precipice of the potential of what people are capable of. And I think that if we do a good job of questioning if the process that we've been implementing is the good one, or could we do better, and then questioning if these people who are pushing it the limit are pushing themselves to the limit, if we question those things, then maybe we'll actually get somewhere, right? And if we react to them in a proper way, maybe we'll actually get somewhere. That all being said,
There.
I have a pro tip.
Oh, go for it.
Um,
Go for it. Well, actually, no, I just want to point out really quick.
yeah.
You said there's a lot of work to do. These kids are great, but there's a lot of work to do. And I love that sentiment. I don't like this thing that gets said a lot where
Hmm.
you're fine just the way that you are. Like, here's a participation ribbon. Like, to me, that's the worst message ever, because then it
You don't feel
makes
good about that either.
you don't feel good. Like I want to know that I am just a fraction of my potential, because then it gives me something to work towards. If you say like, this is all I got, I'm like, darn, I wish I was born to do V18, but I guess I'm just stuck here because this is all I got. It's like,
Yeah.
then
I,
you're just bummed.
and an important note on that participation thing, because I think this can receive a lot of pushback, and I do want to provide clarity and like why we have that stance. But like, I understand the participation thing. Like people want to reward you for the effort that you put in, but that's the only important thing. The problem is that we have an association, or kids have a built-up association to, well, if you didn't win, then you're gonna accept it that you're just a failure and you suck. And it's like, no, you're turning it into that by putting this participation medal on it, because you're now speaking about this fake thing that's not actually happening. No, if people put in work and they try something and they fail, you let them know that. You don't make them feel worse about their value. You don't make them feel that, it wasn't worth it for them to do something like that. It was worth it, but they made a mistake in the end, and it didn't amount to anything that they actually wanted. And that's really important for people to say, and it's really important for people to hear, because it's the truth, right? If people feel an association to their failure or that they're not good enough, then we need to fix that, right? That's something that we need to fix, but not through a participation medal, right? There's another way to fix that.
Yeah. Testpiece says no participation ribbons. You're not good enough the way you are and make climbing dangerous again. That's
Oh
the
God.
test piece motto. All right,
um,
Tim, you got a pro tip? Go for
I
it.
got a pro tip. Just because we didn't say one, and I got to say one. It has nothing to do with this stuff, but maybe. Rapid firing can be useful, but think about your rest and mostly don't do it. If you're working cruxes that have a factor of, or that have factors of being compromised, for example, a muscle gets tired before getting there, or you have too much tension by the time you get there, or you have a lack of breath when you get there, it might be worth going through some discomfort through the process of rapid firing to then work the crux in a low consequence environment, as in you haven't invested all this time and this whole send rip or whatever, there's no consequences there. So sometimes it's nice, because I always hear this thing, Josh, that people say, don't ever rapid fire, it's bad for you. It's like, but no, dude, the kids are out there rapid firing all the time, and there's clearly a bunch of things that they grow, right? They get more power endurance that way because they're just trying the hardest move over and over again in a short period of time. Yes, they might not succeed in gaining objective information that might point to truths, but there's definitely good with that. There's also a good with just being comfortable, being uncomfortable, because you're going to feel not perfect when you get to the crux. So it's important to implement rapid firing when it is useful. But beyond that, rapid firing can probably only be harmful because it's not going to amount to a send. So the big thing there is if you're going for sends, maybe don't rapid fire as much. But if you're not going for sends, rapid firing can be a useful projecting tool.
Yeah, anytime anyone says don't do something ever, it's just like, yeah, yeah, right. Like there's always a scenario where you need to do it. It does. I almost did put down as my pro tip, Tim. Like rest more, or when I climb alone on the mood board, I will sometimes set a timer because I'm prone to rapid firing, or I'll make sure I listen to a whole song before getting back on.
Oh, it's so good.
So yeah, my pro tip comes from being on the moon board too much, and yeah, I don't think it really has anything to do with the topic at hand, but it's one of those things, just like you were saying, this is my life right now. This is what I noticed. This is what I want to share. And so I'm back on the moon board, and I've been getting on to, I don't know, the harder climbs for me, where they're a little more like moon board, where you're like, holy shit, I need to cut here and hold this swing, and this hold is small. And what I noticed is that I was not remembering the classic tip that I got from Jeremy Meigs back in the day that I talked about on the pod with him. It was just try to keep your feet on. So it's like, it's the first step in keeping your feet on. Is try to keep your feet on. So the moon board, typically will see a lot of success by letting your feet come off. Like it asks you to jump so far that your foot needs to come off. And this is like Hosick's kind of calling card, is like when you watch him climb on the moon board, his feet are everywhere. He basically cuts feet for every move. And something I noticed is when, especially on that 2019 set, is I did so many climbs keeping my feet on, and I would watch
Mm.
the videos and I was like, why are people cutting feet here? Like they're clearly tall enough. So I'm on the moon board, I'm trying something hard for me, and I'm realizing that I'm just letting my foot come off, because that it's just so tempting to jump, and then I'm not really strong right now. Like my fingers are a little weak, I'm a little heavier, I'm a little out of shape, and so I'm having a problem with this move. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna put my focus and effort into keeping my foot on. Sure enough, I do the move, right? Like instead of thinking that it was some, I was being negative, I was beating up myself like you're out of shape. I was like, oh, I'm not using the tools available to me that I have. And then the funny thing is that, so look, I still want to be able to do those moves that do require your feet to cut and to hang that crimp with one arm. But the way you get there is actually by keeping your foot on, because it allows you to do those moves and overload them and get stronger slowly but surely. And then you all of a sudden, when you see guys like Zach Gall, like jumping and cutting and grabbing a crimp and swinging out, he didn't get there by jumping and cutting and swinging out on jug after jug after jug and make them smaller. It's by climbing well, and you develop this strength through doing the right technique, through keeping your feet on. And then one day when it's required and you need to cut that foot, you'll have that strength.
Yeah, dude, what a good pro tip. Better climbers have better logic and better belief. If you have enough logic to understand what feet are supposed to do for what times and when, then you have good logic. Whether they're supposed to cut or whether they're supposed to stay on, you just have better logic. And if you believe in those things, then you're probably going to be a better climber too. Such a good pro tip, especially for the moon board.
By the way, on this move, it was really interesting. you came from a left hand that was a side pull with a high right foot, and then you crossed up to a
Mm,
crimp that was above you, above that left hand on the same column. So it's interesting because you have a side pull and a right foot, so you feel like you're gonna move over to the right and get that make that side pull a good opposition, and then you have to kind of come back over. And it's just one of these things where sometimes these dynamic moves, people think like, oh, I need to get my foot up and like jump to this or keep my foot on. But if you look at my motion, it's like a half circle. It's like I grab that left hand, I get my right foot up high, and then I jump, or I my move to that hold that's straight up and to the left is actually to the right first, and then I reach out. It's like this almost J curve, or yeah, semicircle. And it's just something that I think people don't like. If what you were thinking of was that your feet were going to come off, then then you would just jump straight to it. And
mhm.
this is where that climbing IQ and understanding movement, like, no, it's about putting your foot on and heading almost away from the freaking hold, like go to the right to then reach over. And it's just, I don't know, damn, I love climbing.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean that's why coaching is so cool, and like, and you all can do it yourselves. Look, watch a video, try and move like that. Look at it from where you're about to stick the move and see what's missing. If you can identify what's missing, then you can see what you're supposed to implement, right? Sometimes there's too much of an arc. Sometimes there's not enough of an arc, right? And why is there no arc? Why should there be an arc? Why should there not be an arc, right? Like, if you can answer those questions or ask yourself those questions, you could probably coach yourself to like stick a movement, or at least identifying. Right, identification is one of the first mistakes that people make in coaching themselves, and that's a good way to do it, is to make logical reasoning as to what your body parts are doing, what do you have an opportunity to choose your body parts to do. So a little bit of self-coaching
Yeah.
tip.
Damn, Tim, I kind of want to buy that new 2024
Oh, dude,
set for
it's
the
so
moon
cool
board.
looking.
And I think I would have more success on it, but I just haven't really gotten a chance to seriously sink my teeth into the 2016 set. Like, it just,
Hmm.
I got injured or like I never, like there's still maybe 30 climbs or something, maybe 30 or 40 climbs and that I have left. And, that's where I'm going to get my ass kicked. That's where I'm going to have to go deep and really learn something. So I don't know if I'm quite ready to jump ship yet. I don't want to take the easy way out, but
Yeah, you should though. I mean, I recently had a conversation with Ravioli Biceps, and we were talking about the 2024 set, and it was mostly positive things. It was mostly, we were talking about like a lot of negative reactions from the community, but honestly, it was cool to hear Ravioli's opinion on it,
mm,
which was mostly good, dude. It sounds exciting. I would recommend that you maybe at a certain point, if you have the opportunity to get that set, take a pause on the 2016 set, because that'll always be there and you can always go back. But
yeah, yeah.
that I want to really hear thoughts on that new set, and I kind of want to go and climb on it
Maybe I
myself.
can come visit you guys and climb with Ravioli, and
That'd be fun.
maybe we should get him on the pod. If anyone has very good, well thought out opinions on the 2024 set this early in the game, it's going to be him because he's done them all. So,
Yeah,
okay. Well, if you made it this far, I'm just going to do the announcements really quick because I totally, we lost the flow. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. We just embraced the flow into the
kept the flow.
topic, kept the flow. Yeah. So if you made it this far, you guys should come join our next classroom. It's coming up on January 24th, a Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, just, I don't know, start the year off right by getting any question you have answered by Tim and I. And I gotta say, Tim, the classrooms are getting somewhat full. Like, I don't know how many more people we could get in there and not have it go for 4 hours, but I don't know. I think it's like a good. It's just it's fun for us. It's a good way to get your questions answered that we don't cover on the podcast. But I kind of want to rename these office hours, Tim, because it's like in college. Like, the class has some topic, like we just went to this topic, but then you go to the teacher's office hours during these set period of time. You can ask them anything. So I don't know. It doesn't really matter,
Feels more
but
like that. It does
yeah.
feel more like that. This feels more like the classroom, where it's like everybody's listening to stuff, and then it's like, oh, office hours are, they're so sick, dude. Like, I can't. I'm sorry. I gotta jump in. The classrooms, right? What we're doing right now, or the office hours, are like some of my favorite discussions to have. They're really really special, and they're a lot more specific, and they're a little bit more raw, which is cool.
Tim, I didn't tell you, but I had to. So I just posted. Yeah, they're some of the best stuff we do, and now they are all on Patreon. So if you sign up for Patreon, for office hours or classroom, you can get all of our past ones, which we have dozen plus hours of content. But just to show you how raw they are, I had to edit some of the last one. We had to take out a name, take out some of the stuff that we talked about, because not because they can't be shared or used as tools for those people there, but there's just some stuff that the climbing community has to keep secret. I feel like that's like a total teaser. That was not the intention, but you said raw, and I was like, dude, it was so raw I had to edit it before releasing it. So yeah, and the other announcement that I have, which you don't know a ton about, Tim, is that we got some YouTube coming out soon. We got some help on the YouTube front. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you,
and
Joseph.
we'll do some short clips on YouTube, but also we'll get the full episodes up there. They're not going to be edited. They're going to be some talking heads, but that's probably one of the most requested things we get, Tim, is people want YouTube. And I know it should be easy for us, but I got another business. Tim's a professional climber. It's just hard to fit it all in, you guys. And but I know how important YouTube is. I know you want to see Tim in the closet, and me in my office slash guest bedroom. But we'll get them up there, and look forward to sharing the video too.
Sweet. Hey, thank you guys for an awesome opportunity to talk about complex ideas in rock climbing. Hope you guys stay tuned for the next one.
Yeah, Happy New Year again, and see you in a few weeks.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.